Rick Parker grew up in Savannah, Georgia, and for many years he has lived in Falmouth, where he is a professional artist.
He is out with a new book about one of the defining periods of his life, which occurred during an especially turbulent time for America. Rick Parker begins his story when he was a boy who was, by his own account, shy, reserved, not one of the popular kids.
The only way I was able to make anybody like me was show them some artwork. They paid attention to me for a few seconds at that point, but I was shy.
You always liked to draw, right?
Always loved to draw from a very early age, and when I was 7 years old, my second grade teacher took one of the drawings that I'd done and held it up to the class, and I felt for the first time, some sense of, wow, somebody likes something, that I've done.
When Rick Parker turned 18, the United States was sending thousands more soldiers to Vietnam. Casualties were rising. Each month, hundreds of servicemen were being killed or wounded. That year, 1966, the U.S. military drafted 382,000 young men. A growing number of them wanted no part of fighting in the jungles of Southeast Asia. Were you fearful that you were going to be drafted when you turned 18?
Absolutely. I knew that it was happening to people, but I didn't think my mother would let that happen to me. I led a sheltered life. I was overly protected by my mother, and I just didn't think that, I knew somehow, that she was going to save me.
She didn't, and Rick Parker, a shy, insecure teenager, was drafted into the Army, even though he seemed ill-suited for the life of a soldier.
Well, I certainly was on the losing end of every fight that I'd ever gotten in as a kid, and I didn't want to do anything that involved hand-to-hand combat. I knew that I would be on the losing end of that, and I just assumed that I was going to get sent to Vietnam, and I assumed that I was going to get killed. I just accepted that.
Life in the Army was inspiring and depressing, enlightening and absurd. Even then, there were many times when Parker thought, this is unbelievable. I've got to tell somebody about this someday. And now, more than 50 years later, he has written and illustrated a graphic novel memoir about his years in the military called Drafted. In the book, you spend quite a bit of time writing about and illustrating what life was like for you in basic training. Overall, how did you feel about that period of your time in the service?
Well, I hadn't been in the Army very long when I started to like it. It was the first time in my life I ever had friends, and guys to go out and drink beer with.
One of the interesting stories in the book is about how, and you hadn't been in the Army for too long, but the other guys saw you drawing a lot, and one of them came over and he had a photo of his girlfriend, and he said, right, can you do a drawing of her?
Yeah. Well, I was afraid he was going to beat me up no matter what I did. And so I found a piece of paper and a pencil somewhere, and I sat down on a footlocker, and I drew this, spent about an hour, and I drew this picture, and I think it looked pretty good, and I gave it to him. And the guy says, now that's the shit. And I thought, that's the shit. I mean, what is he talking about? He was from New York.
That was a compliment.
And it was a compliment. So,
and then the next
day, there were 14 other people, with pictures of their girlfriends that were approaching me as I'm trying to get some sleep.
Along the way, Parker became, rather improbably, an officer.
I don't like to tell people what to do, and I don't like people telling me what to do. So it was a difficult situation for me and as an officer.
Parker has had a noteworthy career. As an artist and letterer, he worked on such comic books as Spider-Man, The Hulk, Iron Man, Prince Valiant, G.I. Joe, and more.
My first character when I was working at Marvel was a stick figure character, because I didn't feel like I could draw the superhero characters, the big muscular people in these complicated uniforms. I thought I'll never be able to do that.
Parker has a keen sense for the absurd, and his editor for Drafted realized that sensibility needed to come through.
When I first started, I told him, this is a book of a young man who gets drafted into the Army during the war in Vietnam. And he said, no, Rick, this is a story of a young artist who gets drafted into the Army during the war in Vietnam. Drafted
has two qualities that I think every storyteller should strive for. It's, on the one hand, a really personal story, and on the other hand, a universal story.
Yeah, I thought when I was working on this, I thought it was just going to be for me. But then it wasn't very long before I realized there's a lot of people who went through this. They're going to be able to relate to this. They're going to see themselves in this book.
Parker has worked more than 50 years as a professional artist and created a formidable body of work. But he had done almost no writing, which made this project one he's especially proud of.
I love my fine artwork, and you saw some of the stuff in the other room, but that's not who I am anymore. I'm more of a storyteller, and I'm a storyteller who likes to draw.
Only in the last couple of years, while working on this book and its sequel, has he really felt he's found the work he was meant to do.
This is the culmination of my life as an artist. You know, I've found the thing that I should have been doing. It took me a long time to find it, but I found it, and then I did it. And that's a nice, feeling of satisfaction.
I'm obsessed with this man. And we have talked about this before too, that it's fascinating and heartwarming when you find somebody who can say, like, it's never too late to go and do what you love to do.
Yeah, and he has been an artist for half a century, a little more than that now. But finally, by combining the writing and the illustrating, he really feels he's doing, as he said, what he was meant to do.
Just a shy boy.
Yeah, and the story he tells in Drafted is so good. It's emotional, it's funny, it's poignant. I love the illustrations.
Yeah.
So
much to take away from it.
There's a lot there to sort through from a very interesting time in American history, one coming-of-age story.
Very, very cool.
So if you would like to meet Rick Parker, he has a book signing event at Print a Bookstore in Portland. It's happening on Tuesday, September 24th. The event starts at 7 in the evening.
Sounds like fun. By the way, Rick is now working on a sequel to Drafted. This next book will pick up his story after his time in the Army until of moving to New York City with the hope of making a living as a young artist. I can't wait to see how that story ends.